Now, before we wrap this up, one final thing that caught me by surprise, and I wasn't a fan. 2024 Land Cruiser 1958. This is the cheapest trim of Land Cruiser that you can buy. Although it's not really a Land Cruiser, is it? This is really a 250 series Prado overseas, but here in the US, they're not getting rid of the full-blown Land Cruiser, unless you want to go up to the Lexus LX. And now we get this, the Prado, which is the little brother. Not a full-blown Land Cruiser, but still incredibly capable. We're on the TNG AF platform. It's also shared with the Lexus GX as well as the Toyota 4Runner. So there are 3 vehicles on that same platform, this one being slotted in the middle, the GX being a higher price point, and the 4Runner being at a lower price point. 112-inch wheelbase on all 3 models. I gotta say, this thing looks sharp. And I'm not really a truck guy, but I've been living with this for the last week. And I gotta say, I'm pleasantly surprised. Even my mom and girlfriend, they like the way this thing looks. It has that retro cool, especially on this lower trim. You have the more retro circular front lights. Whereas on the regular Land Cruiser, which is a few $1,000s more, this is starting in right around $57,000, $58,000 MSRP. A few thousand more in the low 60s, you get the Land Cruiser trim, whereas this Land Cruiser 1958 is below. And that has these horizontal lights instead, which are also really sharp looking. But man, it looks great. It has this really masculine, rugged look to it. I think Toyota is rocking the boxy design language in the best way possible. But the most controversial thing about this new Land Cruiser is actually the powertrain. Gone is the naturally aspirated Toyota V8, and now we have a 2.4 turbocharged inline-4 hybrid. That's the iForce Max, same engine that's in the Tacoma, and it's mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission with a 48 horsepower electric motor that's integrated into that transmission. It's pushing out 326 horsepower, 465 pound-feet of torque, with full-time all-wheel drive and a center-locking differential and low-range transfer case. In terms of suspension, we have independent double wishbone in the front and a solid axle with coil springs in the rear. In this 1958 trim, we have smaller wheels. These are 18-inch wheels wrapped in 245 section width rubber. Curb weight of this is right around 5,000 pounds, whereas the Lexus GX, which I did also drive last year, is around 5,600 to 5,700 pounds, so a bit more than 10% heavier than this. And even though they do have the same wheelbase, this one is a few inches shorter, 193.7 inches versus the GX at 197 inches. And technically, this actually has better approach and departure angles than the GX, but the GX has other components that make it better suited for off-roading. But we're not going to get into the details of off-roading here because let's be real, I feel like 95% plus of buyers are not going to do proper hardcore off-roading, just something light at the most. So we're going to focus on how it drives on street today. Now this one as spec has an MSRP of $59,500 because we have a couple $1,000s in things like rock rails, the roof rack, and some skid plates. Now before we drive this, I want to show you with this architecture, with the hybrid, and yes, we're going to clear that. This load floor is so high. It's actually quite a bit higher than you'd expect. I'm 6'1", and when I stand here, this is like, it's not quite at my belly button, but it's like hip, right around hip bone level. And that is going to compromise the total usable space here vertically. And also if you are loading things that are heavier in the back, then keep that in mind. It is a higher vertical distance. You need to move the object. No power lift gate on this lower trim. It's only a 2-row, which is interesting because what you can see here, so these seats do fold almost fully flat. They actually go up like this too. So you know that this was designed for 3 rows, but the Land Cruiser only comes in 2 rows. And with the 1958, we have these cloth seats, which I think are pretty retro and pretty cool. That's really the theme and the vibe of this car, is that this lowest base trim, it is the cheapest, and you're not going to have the fanciest materials. You're not having the leather of the higher trim, right? But you get simple, back to basics, rugged, but this cool and durable feel to it. So actually, I guess as a kid who grew up with Toyotas and Hondas in the 90s with cloth seats, this has some level of nostalgia and cool factor to it. Got an 8-inch screen on this 1958. If you go to the higher trim, you get a 12-inch which would probably feel more appropriate. And I think they also widened it. It's not taller, it's wider, which I think is the right move there. Wireless Apple CarPlay is standard. So I'm going to plug mine in so I can charge my phone in the meantime. Matte digital gauge cluster as well. And I had a few comments from passengers that it's really dark, but it's just because of the viewing angle. For the driver, it's totally fine, totally adequate. But if you are a passenger looking at it from the side, they're not going to be able to see it, which does not matter at all. The rest of the interior, I think, feels very cohesive with the exterior. You have these grab handles for when you're getting in and out. Love that little Land Cruiser. This is hard touch plastic. Again, on the higher trim, you have nicer materials here, but at this base trim, you're getting the cheaper materials, but it still feels nice and rugged. Nice beefy steering wheel. Physical HVAC, thank you. Very easy to use. Don't even have to take your eyes off the road to adjust it. You do have your heated seats as well as heated steering wheel, even on this base trim. And your drive mode selector is here. We're going to be normal. And today, we're obviously not going to be messing with the four-wheel drive settings. Now, in terms of driving position and visibility, actually feels pretty nice. These seats do not have any height adjustment and they are manual. They're not power adjustable, but at 6'1", I'm in a very good position. I'm very upright, obviously, in a car like this. That's no surprise, and really good visibility. When this car was first announced, I got pretty hyped because to me, it was the reincarnation, the coming back of the FJ Cruiser, which I thought was one of the coolest SUVs back in the day. And while it doesn't have 3 windshield wipers, it does have some shared DNA in terms of design language, at least. Now, I daily drive a Mazda CX-50, and that's obviously a lot lighter. It's not competing with this vehicle at all. It is a unibody. It's not a body on frame like this. And this has a very different feel to it. It's a proper truck. And I'm actually pleasantly surprised that I like it more than I thought, because what I love about the CX-50 is that it feels very competent and sporty and dynamic for a CUV. This is obviously something completely different. And the way this makes me feel as a driver is actually more calming. You're pretty high up, great visibility. I find myself actually driving slower and calmer. I tend to very type A, very go, go, go. And I'm trying to go from one thing to the next, not waste time. If the speed limit is 40, I'll generally be going 45 because the cop is not going to give me a ticket at 45. I won't go higher than that, but I'll always max out the allowable speed on any road. And with this car, I just don't find myself doing that. It's a much more relaxed driving experience, and that was surprising to me. It's a little bit less rushed and a little bit more relaxed, which I appreciate. But with a body on frame, what you're getting is compromised ride quality. So what's interesting is that this rides noticeably better than the Lexus GX. And you may think, hey, hold on a second, it's a Lexus, of course it's going to drive better. But the reason is twofold. Number one, the Lexus GX actually weighs more. Substantially more, right? Like 600 or 700 pounds more than this. And the second factor is the wheels and tires, because the Lexus GX is riding on thinner sidewalls. So what I was surprised by was how much of the initial impact was transmitted into the cabin in the GX, especially over like expansion joints on the highway. Whereas in this, I was surprised. I thought, wait a second, why is this more comfortable? And it's because of those two reasons. Now, both vehicles are very softly sprung. They have a high center of gravity. So what you need to know is that they're going to feel a little bit wallowy. You're not expecting a super sharp driving experience. Obviously, that's not what these things are about. You're going to have your body roll, your dive, your squat. And while the ride is relatively comfortable, you are going to notice some of the impacts. And that's just the price you pay with body on frame. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the engine. 2.4 liter inline-4 turbocharged hybrid is not anyone's first pick, but those are the times that we live in. Gone is the V8. You get better fuel efficiency here, although not as good as the EPA estimated. You're looking at more like low 20s essentially, realistically. The way they integrated the hybrid assist though is actually excellent because it reduces the turbo lag significantly. It's not completely eliminated, but the electric motor fills the gap pretty convincingly when you first get on the throttle. The Lexus GX has a 3.4 liter turbocharged V6. Now, it's around $6,000 more expensive. And the question is that engine that much better than this. Now, when I was driving the GX, I had no issues with the engine. I thought it was great. This engine, in terms of numbers, does not feel underpowered or sluggish. And when you're just puttering around town like I am right now, you don't really notice it. It's relatively quiet. You'll occasionally hear some turbo noises, and yes, inline four is not the smoothest engine, and it is a little bit rattly, but it's not really front and center. The issue is when you start going uphill or you start pushing the car, which again, as I was talking about earlier, is not a frequent occurrence because this car makes you just, at least for me, more relaxed, more chill when I'm driving. But let's go up this hill. It's not the best sound, right? So if you are a car enthusiast, I do think that the engine is going to bother you more. However, for most people who are buying this, who are not car enthusiasts, I don't know how important that is. I think what they care about is performance. Can they overtake? Fuel efficiency, which is better than the old naturally aspirated V8. And I don't think this is going to be a deal breaker for most people. If you are a car enthusiast like me, yes, I would pony up the cash and go with the Lexus GX. Nicer interior quality. I think the styling is even more on point, although this one already looks great. And the engine, of course. The engine, yes, the turbocharged V6 is what the car enthusiast would want. But I think oftentimes when I'm watching reviews and I see car reviewers get very focused and very critical of things like the engine on this vehicle, I feel like they're kind of missing the point, and they're making the video or talking to other car enthusiasts rather than other buyers who aren't going to necessarily care as much about the engine, about the sound, the smoothness, things like that. Now, going back to how it drives, modern Toyotas, their inputs are all calibrated very well, very congruent. You have this, not overly fast steering ratio. It's on the slower end as you would want in a truck like this. It's fairly light, not a lot of weight to the rack, and steering and brakes. I did find myself initially having a little bit of a learning curve on the brake pedal. It felt a bit touchier than the throttle, but quickly got adjusted to it in 10, 20 minutes, and now driving is totally smooth. The 8-speed automatic transmission is also nothing to write home about. It's totally adequate, smooth enough, follows your logic. You can shift it into manual mode as I was doing earlier to engine brake going downhill, just like that. Although unfortunately they have the shift directions wrong, because forward should actually be downshifting and back should be upshifting, just based on how you drive a car. As you're braking, you're getting pushed forward, you want to be pushing this forward to downshift, and as you're accelerating, you're getting pushed back, you want to be pulling back on this to upshift. But a minor thing, and that's more important in sports cars. I think most people aren't even going to notice that in a vehicle like this, but that's just the things that I focus on as someone who mostly drives sports cars. And the final thing that we need to talk about is the price. Now, yes, $58,000 is a lot of money, but in this day and age, everything is getting more and more expensive, unfortunately. Now, compared to the competition, the Ford Bronco, various Jeeps, those max out their towing capacity at 3,500 pounds. This will tow 6,000. Same with the Lexus GX, same platform, obviously. And that's actually pretty appealing to me, because I want to be able to tow my track vehicle to the racetrack. 3,500 pounds, not enough. I need to have at least 5,000 pounds or more in towing capacity to be able to comfortably tow a vehicle to the track. That higher towing capacity is obviously one of the benefits that comes with a body-on-frame vehicle. There are trade-offs though, right? Things like the ride quality, how dynamic it's going to feel. It's a truck, it's not unibody, and you have to be okay with those trade-offs. I personally have been finding myself enjoying it far more than I expected, because it just helps me relax when I drive, and normally I'm go, go, go. So it has that rugged, old school nostalgia, cool factor to it. I was very interested in it because I love the styling. I love the fact that it can tow my vehicle to the track, which is why I would consider buying one. My girlfriend is actually in the market for a new vehicle, and she said while she likes this, there are a few issues. Number one is that she's very reliant on reverse cam. And the reverse cam here, she said, hey, this looks like it's also from 1958. They're going with the whole retro vibe and very low resolution screen. The higher trim will give you a 360, but the camera quality is lacking. But the biggest thing is actually just the size. This does drive smaller than the initial, spec sheet and initial appearance of this car would suggest. It does drive smaller than that and easier, but I think for many people it is going to feel just a tad too large, as it does for my girlfriend. Now, before we wrap this up, one final thing. Toyota driving aids are fairly good, right? The lane centering is good, the adaptive cruise control, traffic jam assist, all those things are fine. Except one thing that caught me by surprise, and I wasn't a fan. It's actually this feature. So you hold OK, PCS on and off. We're going to turn it off. The reason being, what the pre-collision system does is it uses these various sensors in the front to see a car or another object in front, and it'll apply the brakes. So right now, I'm just coasting, and I expect the car to decelerate in a very slow, natural way because I'm coasting. With PCS on, it'll start slowing down and applying the brakes for you preemptively, which feels very unnatural because it can be aggressive. Now, as you can see, I have it on the lowest setting. By default, it starts on the middle. I put on the lowest. Even at the lowest setting, it can be a little bit intrusive and slow you down more than you want to. I find myself having to get on the gas to reduce the amount that it slows me, which is not a good situation. So I like to turn it off. But the annoying thing is every time you start the car, it re-enables. It will not remember your setting from before. And I've been getting kind of used to it, but still not fully. Even after a week of driving it and putting on a couple hundred miles, it does bother me because sometimes I'll get closer behind a vehicle or further, and this may miscalibrate what I am planning on doing when I'm using my human judgment. The machine obviously doesn't have the full context, and I wish I could permanently disable it and not have it re-enable every time I start it up, but that is an issue. So while the pre-collision system I find annoying personally, I'm actually grateful that it exists because in this day and age, I mean, you guys know how the drivers are out there and being distracted on their phones and such. It's probably a very significant net benefit for all of our safety, for whoever's driving this 5,000-pound SUV, that they have something that is looking ahead and pre-applying the brakes as they're looking at their phone and such. Obviously, don't rely on that, but for those instances when people are distracted, not paying attention, it makes me, as the person outside of the vehicle, feel a little bit more at ease. And there you have it, my friends, the 2024 Toyota Land Cruiser 1958. For someone like me, as a car enthusiast, I would pony up the extra cash, go with the Lexus GX, get the V6, better interior quality, and I think even sharper styling. But I gotta say, this Land Cruiser 1958 does make a compelling argument at sub $60,000. Well, my friends, let me know what you think with a comment down below. Much love, and I'll see you all in the next one.